an estate, but you might have other heirs, or you need to verify if there's other people out there who might be due a portion of the estate, whether you're a realtor or a investor wholesaler who finds this for the family, or either petitioner or an attorney, there's services that will find those heirs for you. I'm really lucky to have here today one that I'm working with on a case currently, and I've interviewed in the past, a friend of our program, Michael Zwick. Michael, thank you so much for coming on our program today.
Glad to be here, Bill.
So real quick, you're located in Orlando, Florida.
Correct, but our company is national.
Your company is national, and the company is InheritMore LLC, correct?
So we actually have two companies. Assets International, which is our parent company, does the service that you mentioned, which is to find the owners of assets. 3 years ago, though, we created a subsidiary called InheritMore, which you referenced. InheritMore reverses that process where we help heirs or executors to track down the assets, the inheritance assets that the deceased left behind that they can't find or can't get their hands on.
Very nice. So again, the distinction being, Assets International, what? They locate assets and then find the heirs of those assets?
Correct.
And then the InheritMore is the opposite. There's a particular case that you're looking for the heirs to find that go to that asset.
Right. So an example in the first scenario, finding the heirs, is the one you mentioned that we're working on together, where there's a house where the owner has passed away, and you.
Oops! Hold on. I muted you by accident. I'm sorry, Mike. I muted you by accident. I hit the wrong person.
I'm back. Yeah, I saw that. So, anyways, in terms of the first scenario, case like the one we're working on, where you've identified a house, you want to find the, if I may divulge the basics of it without getting the details, obviously, you want to find the heirs to the owner who has passed away, so you can hopefully buy the property or sell it for them, whatever the case may be. I'm not sure exactly what you want to do, but that's your end. So right now we are endeavoring to find those heirs, and when we find them, they're probably not aware that there's this house there that is worth probably a considerable amount of money, that they will be entitled to the equity that comes out of it. On the reverse situation, we have cases where someone might call us and say, my uncle or father or whoever passed away, and I don't know what assets he owned. I really don't know anything about his finances. I've got a busy life. Can you find his assets for me? So what we'll do is we'll do investigation. We'll see whatever assets we can find, and then we'll also do the legwork to get those assets into the heirs' hands.
Got it. So the case I have is one where we know of a couple heirs, but there might be more. So you're kind of really doing a little bit of both. We have two particular heirs we've identified, and your job is to reach out to them and let them know there's some assets they might be get that. And then do you charge a fee for your service, or how do you make that work for you? Is it business?
In both cases, we charge a percentage. So we get a percentage of whatever the heirs are receiving, whether it's because we found them after we located the assets, or they hire us. They know, okay, whatever assets we find, we will get a percentage of the value.
So they know up front there's going to be a percentage, but on the other hand, if you're bringing them assets they're not aware of, they should be thrilled to hear from you, right?
Right. Plus, if we wind up coming up empty, then they don't owe us anything.
So there's no cost. There's no cost. So you have to have a case where you feel like there's something worth pursuing. Otherwise, you're wasting your time.
Right. So when we're looking for heirs, typically we want to know what is the value of the asset or assets that are out there before we go hunting down. We don't want to, frankly, spend all our time to find someone to get them $1,000. It's just not worth our while with our cost of business. On the flip side, if we're doing an asset search on behalf of the heirs, we will we'll do an interview, and we'll determine what we can about the deceased. What he or she did for a living, how old, basic idea of who that person was, so we get an idea of whether it's worth it. And sometimes we strike out, and sometimes we strike gold.
So can you share kind of what some of the common scenarios look like? What are the common assets you find, and how much dollar amount are you recovering for a typical customer?
So we don't really have are you talking about for the finding inheritance assets?
Sure.
So in that case, we don't necessarily have a typical case, but usually when we're looking, we're pretty hopeful or confident we're going to find at least something into the high five figures, if not into six figures. Usually when they get into seven figures, it tends to be that the people were a little more organized in terms of telling people what they owned before they passed away. So, recent case we had, our client lives in Las Vegas. He's the son and sole heir of the deceased, who worked in an administrative position for the Maryland State Police. So we weren't able, the only asset we were able to find was her pension from the state police. She worked there for a number of years, obviously being in government position, she got a pension. So she got $100,000 that they're waiting for. Plus the son is going to get a monthly payout for the rest of his life.
Nice.
So, and he's only in his 40s. So we're looking at a pretty decent amount of money by the time all is said and done. I see someone has asked for my contact information. I can put my email in there, and also I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn. That's actually how Bill and I connected, and I'm very active on there. But I'll put my primary email into the chat right now, so you'll have it.
There's his LinkedIn profile. It's just linkedin.com. His profile is Michael Zwick, ZWICK. And then assets, InheritMore.com is the website.
Right, that's one, and the other one is AssetsInternational.com.
Assets International is the other one.
Yeah.
So, and we'll put those in the chat box as well.
And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a connection request, and I'll love to connect with anybody who can, use my help, whether they're hiring me or just need a sounding board or advice for something.
So what, if you were to describe your business, what percentage would you say is, are you getting approached by families or, prospective heirs? What percentage of the time are you approached by attorneys where there's an estate being put together? I mean, what percentage by realtors or investors or other kind of professionals?
Usually it's more the family or the executor. Either they've been referred to me by the attorney or someone who knows me or has worked with me, or the attorney themselves. It's usually more from inside the estates where it's the family. So it's usually, like I said, the executor or heir or the prospective executor or their attorney.
Okay. And so that most common scenario is somebody already knows who you are. That's why we have you on the call today, that those of us who work in this field, we know somebody who's looking for heirs. There are times when heirs aren't available, or you find one, let's say, and yet the court's wondering, are there more, right? You might find a son or cousin or something. Do you offer any kind of documentation to the court to say that you gave it your reasonable effort, your professional effort, and to the best of your knowledge, there are no more heirs? Is that something that you provide as part of your service?
So typically we will, normally when someone files for probate, they are signing under penalty of perjury. And one of the things they're signing is saying these are who the heirs are, with the implication that there are no other heirs to the exclusion of those on the list. So some courts are some more stricter than others. I can tell you in New York City, it can be very difficult because they want you to prove a negative. Someone can come forward and say, I'm the decedent's son. And they'll say, well, prove to us that the decedent didn't have any other children. Well, it's kind of hard to prove that negative. Whereas most other courts, though, if someone is signing under penalty of perjury and saying, these are the heirs and to the exclusion of everybody else, the courts will usually accept that. Sometimes they will want, some courts will ask for a statement by a disinterested person, someone who's not going to benefit from the estate, saying that these facts are true. Some courts, especially if it's later on where the probate's already gone through, and then someone comes forward and says, hey, I'm an heir, then at that point they might want some sort of statement or affidavit from a genealogist who has no interest in the matter, again, to say, yeah, this is the family tree, and these are the only people in the family tree.
And do you do that? Do you provide those kind of statements?
We do, or we might bring in someone, because if we're getting a fee, then we're no longer a disinterested party. We'll typically bring in somebody else. We have some really good genealogists that we work with that are outside contractors that sometimes will handle some of our overflow work or really in-depth work that might be beyond what my staff has the time or ability to handle. So we usually do that.
So the case we're working on, I have somebody who's able to identify two relatives. I think in this case, they're niece and nephew. So no immediate family. We know there is no spouse. We know there are no children. The question is, are there more siblings that might have had more kids?
Right.
My contact has no idea.
Right.
You're going to bring the assets to at least the two that we've identified so far. Are you
Right.
looking for more heirs?
So before we we just this afternoon ordered the death certificate. So hopefully we'll get it in the next week or two. Once we get that, I think it shouldn't take more than a few hours of research at most to determine whether there are any other heirs. So we just want to, we like to, unless you tell me the time is of the essence, we'd like to kind of take our time and build step by step before we, so we know, partly because if we approach these two heirs, they're going to want to know, okay, what's my share of it? And we don't want to overpromise and say, oh, you're getting 50% of this amount when it turns out there are 7 other heirs, in which case they're each only getting 1/9.
Correct. So and again, I'm holding you on this case just to understand in general then. So you're generally going to check and see and have a degree of confidence. Like in this case, maybe there are no other heirs, or maybe you'll discover there are, but at that point you have a fair level of confidence, but and then so you approach those two. Will you, if you discover other heirs, will you also reach out to them, or are you going to let that be?
We would probably reach out to them, and obviously we want them to sign with us so that each one of them, when they get their inheritance, would give us a fee.
Right, but I can see the challenge there is if there's only 2 and you have both of them signed up, for you to find a third who doesn't sign up with you would be, work against you financially. That then the challenge is, where do you have a conflict of interest? So I can see the potential there.
Right. So I mean, there are other ways around it where we work out an agreement with whoever's the executor. There are some ways around, especially where there's a large number of heirs, and it's just not really practical to sign them all. But we'll do whatever we can.
So I've seen cases like that where maybe it was $500,000 and there might be 10, 15 different heirs. At what point does it stop being productive for you?
So, we look at it as the amount that we are going to charge or make on a gross revenue basis per heir, because, we have to spend the time to go out and get that, sign each person to a contract. So typically in most cases, we're generally working with one person, hopefully, who can kind of coordinate and be our point person, the rest of the family.
Right.
That's ideally. Obviously, the most ideal case is where there's only one heir, and then only one person decided. It's as easy. We have those cases where someone passes away, and there literally is only one heir. A child, grandchild, whatever the case might be.
So on this call, and look, for the rest of you in the call, it's meant to be participative. So feel free to put questions in the chat box, raise your hand, come in live. Love to have you ask questions. Love to make it as participative as possible. I think that's going to get us the best learning. I do this because I need to learn. I appreciate Michael's time and sharing with us today, so I can be better at my craft and maybe bring him more business as well. So I'm glad to do both. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, I see Mendel. Nice to see you as well. Feel free to ask questions there as well, and we'll pick up the questions off the live stream. So, Michael, you mentioned that your business usually comes down to an attorney. Maybe it's a family member. I guess you do some marketing of some sort, or they're going to go to an attorney. Do you know somebody? They're going to come to you. So obviously, I'm sure that building attorney relationships is an important piece of your business. Share, because a lot of the people on our call are real estate agents who are looking to build similar relationships in parallel with you, or maybe could work with you. And I'm sure you work with some real estate agents that are good, some that are not so good. What are some tips, if any, would you give to a real estate agent who's looking to build a business and earn more referrals or deepen the relationship with attorneys? What are some tips that you might recommend to them for their business?
I mean, it's all about really building the relationship. It's not about selling. As I mentioned, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post pretty much every weekday. I try not to be salesy. I will tell you, when I first started doing it, I said, okay, I'm going to do a video every day, like a minute or so. I was awful. I was very stiff. I was reading from a script, and a friend of mine said, Michael, you got to stop doing this. He says, just talk. Don't use a script. Have a basic idea what you're going to say, and just talk. Be expressive. Pretend you're talking to me sitting across the table from you. And then that's what I would do. And then I switched over more to doing written ones, but I still kind of kept my voice there. And it's kind of my. I think I'm a pretty funny guy. I'm dealing obviously with matters of death.
That's funny. No.
Thank one of my kids. So I try to inject some humor into it, especially because I'm dealing with stuff to do with people's death. I try to get something that gets someone's interest, and then I will mention what I do, but it's not always here's what I do, because frankly you don't want to hear that. The way I looked at it is LinkedIn is like a real life, is like a virtual, nonstop, massive networking event. You would never go into a networking event and say, hey, I'm Michael, here's what I do, hire me. You won't get much business out of that. Same thing. And actually, also go to events where your people are. So for example, like I said, I'm here in Orlando. In 2 weeks is the Heckerling Institute conference. It's over 3,000 professionals in the estate planning world. It's originally really for an educational thing for estate planning attorneys, but it's become a massive networking event. And for me, I'm going, don't tell them, I'm not registering. A lot of people just show up, they go, you just do the networking. It's nonstop from apparently in the morning. Sometimes people say till late at night. I've told my wife, don't expect to see me much that week other than to come home to sleep. It's really just about building relationships, not being salesy, just building relationship. Obviously, you want them to know what you do, but people do business with people. People don't do business with companies. So they want to do business with people they like, people they trust, and they don't want to feel like they're always being put upon. And that's kind of my general advice to people about networking.
That's great. And you mentioned the Heckling event. I'd love to go. We'd have some personal issues going on, but if I was on the East Coast, it wasn't such a big travel, I would definitely go. Talk a little bit. So that's on the relationships, and mostly your relationships then are with professionals, estate planning attorneys, and probate attorneys. Talk a bit about, at the same time, you get phone calls from families. I imagine that you have families that call you, and maybe they could do something right away, but they don't do anything for a period of time. Maybe whatever reasons, we all get busy. How do you, it's hard to build a relationship with all those people and over such a period of time. What do you do to stay in touch with, I would call them prospects or prospective customers? What do you do to stay in touch with those people over a period of time so that if they don't do business with you right away, but when they're back on the horse 6 months from now, they're going to call you and complete the transaction with you?
So we have a CRM. It's actually it's an access database that we have built and kind of added onto over the years. So whenever I do get they call a prospect or a lead, I'll create a file for that person, and then put a tickler, and then put a schedule it for, I'll have my notes. We are going back to the founding of Access International 21 years ago. We are anal compulsive about keeping notes on phone calls. Even if I call someone and I call you and leave you a voicemail message, Bill, not that we have a file for you, but if we did, I would say, it would say in there, December, was it 29th, December 29th, the thing would actually timestamp it for me. So I just have to write MJZ, which is my initial, left voicemail message for Bill Gross at so-and-so phone number. So this way I have a record of it. Every email gets copied and pasted into it. So, and I can schedule that, saying, okay, I left him a voicemail. I'm going to schedule for a month out if I don't hear from him between now and then. So it's in there. I can't tell you what the cost is of starting a CRM, because frankly, that's more tech stuff that my partner handles. And it's a database that we built ourselves and keep tinkering with. And every so often we look into switching over to one of those, like Salesforce or one of those ones, but what we have works. So we keep on doing it. But I'd say invest in some sort of system, even if it is using various Outlook tools. Outlook does have access that you can create a database in. Using your calendar. I'm very big. If whatever's not in my Outlook in that Access database, if I have to do this time sensitive, it's on my Outlook calendar. As my wife will tell you, I will forget. Even if it's just, I have literally in my calendar days I have to drive carpool. Partly so it blocks off my calendar because I have links to my Calendly link for people to schedule things, but also it's just my reminder of don't schedule things on these days at these times.
Well, that was a lot to unpack, and I appreciate the detail. And so I think that's the common response, which is you need some sort of technical tool to stay in touch with the multitude of prospective consumers. Yes. And then the relationships are the ones who refer in that business or help get you in those positions. So I really appreciate you anchoring that. I'm sure along the way you deal with real estate agents, investors, even attorneys, some that are top of their game and some that are not. What do you see as a person who works with them behind the scenes? What do you see as the common traits of those that are more successful versus those that are struggling with their business?
I think a big factor in pretty much every profession is keeping open communications with your clients, with your people. It's just, if you don't, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself for your clients just not wanting, or other people not wanting to deal with you. I know, professionals who just never return phone calls, and I don't get how they survive in business. I would say, going back to also connecting with probate attorneys in specific, I will tell you that and I don't know if there are any on the call here, but I will tell you that, and there obviously are exceptions, but most probate attorneys I know are not super active on LinkedIn or any social media. They tend to it tends to be an industry that brings in more old school thinking, that you don't see too many big probate practices. They're not very big on social media. Those that are do pretty well. I'll tell you, in terms of the realtors I see, for example, on LinkedIn, and this goes back to what I was saying about not being salesy, is the ones who succeed in building relationships are the ones who are out there regularly posting and are engaging on not just a sales thing, and not just putting up an e-flyer or a nice little motivational quote. As you can see, when I go to events, whatever, I will be wearing probably a jacket and, at least a suit jacket or a sport jacket. But I'm known as in addition to what I do, guy who wears college t-shirts. I collect them. So that's part of my persona. I'm not putting up any sort of professional logos on my thing. I have some pretty unprofessional pictures I take with my camera, with my cell phone. And it's just about being yourself. Again, it goes back to what I was saying before, just be yourself, but also be, in relation to this question, be competent in what you do.
Oh, for sure. That's good advice. It's interesting. As a real estate agent, I see other realtors post, their listings sell, and I was, wow, I just sold that listing. Maybe I should post it. Maybe I should do that. And I think, no, I can't really stand it when other people do that in a group I'm involved with. I don't care they sold a listing. I imagine they sell their listings at some point. It's not really that exciting. Now, team members are different. I'm happy for them. But I think in general, as real estate agents, we always have to think, what value are we creating for our prospect? What value are you creating for the people we do with, and what information would they like? And I know when I follow you, part's educational, part is just entertainment. I mean, you're genuine, you're you. And so talk a little bit about your branding or your approach on LinkedIn. I would say, I look at LinkedIn as normally being more buttoned down and more straight, for at least the way I approach it, more straight education and valuable information. And I see you do posts regularly that are more, branded and more fun and more engaging with you personally. So talk about your strategy a little bit on your social media, if you would.
So, you are right. LinkedIn used to be very dry. LinkedIn, for me, especially until a few years ago, was really, I treat it as my virtual Rolodex. I treat it as my way to keep in touch with people. Friends from college. If I was wondering, hey, what's my friend Josh up to these days, I could go to his profile and see, oh, he's now at so-and-so law firm or whatever, as opposed to where he was 5 years before. Part of it is because with Assets International, there wasn't as much marketing involved, because a good deal of our work in that regard is we get a lot of lists from government agencies regarding money that they're sitting on. So we will deal with that. So there wasn't as much return on investment. Excuse me. There wasn't as much return of investment on marketing as we launched InheritMore, where we find the inheritance assets, and it's a very different. I think we're really the only ones doing it. We had to really get out there and let people know we're there. So I've been very active on it for the last 2.5 years since we launched InheritMore. And like I said, it's about developing your own persona, but don't create a persona. Just be your persona. Be who you already are. There's the old saying of don't be anyone else, because those spots are already taken. Be you. And some of those successful people that I know on LinkedIn, in terms of their popularity, in terms of referrals they're getting, it's really just them being themselves again, being entertaining, being thought-provoking, letting people know what they do, but not in a very in-your-face manner. It's creating certain things, like, for example, on Mondays, I started a thing called Movie Monday, where every Monday I'm posting, I take a movie and I try to tie it to something to do with probate or inheritance. So recently, I think I did Die Hard, because everybody thinks of it as the great Christmas movie. I think of it as the all-time Hanukkah movie, but that's a different story. But anyways, I get into, okay, what would have happened if John McClane had died that night? What assets would he have left behind? And I talked about the fact that he would have left behind probably a pretty sizable pension with the New York City Police. He probably, being the type of guy he was, he probably didn't take much sick or vacation time. And people don't realize is that a lot of government employees or union employees get to keep banking the monetary value of their vacation and sick time. We had a case, actually a real life case, a few years ago, where a Cleveland, Ohio police officer died, and we found that he had $100,000 in the bank of unused vacation and sick time that his widow got to inherit. So I turned that into a post. Wow. I also say on LinkedIn, you always want that call to action. Because you want a conversation going. The more conversation on your post, the more likes on your post, the more other people are going to see it, not just your connections, but your connections. And so you want, even if the question at the end has nothing to do with what you do. So I did, during December, I did most all holiday movies as the Monday movie Monday. So one of them was just simply, what's your favorite holiday movie? And whenever someone would respond, I always make sure, excuse me, to then respond with my own comment, preferably a question, to keep the conversation going. Right. Sometimes having those conversations in direct message and having conversations, again, is about having conversation, about letting people know who you are, and helping that also be, I would say, be a resource. Bill, I think you're a member of, there's a Facebook group called Probate Support and Help that I'm in. It's got over 2,000 users. I would recommend anybody who wants to get in there. You have a number of people who are there who are dealing with probate mostly for the first time and have questions on what to do. And I've gotten very little business out of it directly, but what I do is I make people know who I am. I let them know that I've been in the asset recovery business for 20 years, and I know a lot of attorneys around the country. So one of the things I'm doing is I get referrals. People will say to me, I'm lost. I go, where are you located? They'll say Jackson, Mississippi. I go, here's someone in Jackson, Mississippi. Here's an attorney to refer to. Now I've helped that person out. I probably won't get anything from them, but now I've made that goodwill with that attorney in Jackson. Besides the fact of the inherent goodness of helping someone out, I've now had a reason to call that attorney in Jackson, Mississippi, and get on his or her radar, and hopefully get on their goodwill. I see someone asked this. I think, let me look up to make sure I've got it right, because I hope I'm pronouncing it, Angie has asked and what the name of the group is. So I just want to make sure I'm getting it correctly.
Probate
It's called-
support and help. I just went
It's
on this.
probate support and help.
I
Yes.
signed up for it to join, and my membership's pending because it sounds right on point. And sounds like right up the alley of the kind of things that I do. Now, I have my own probate group called Probate Experts, and we do get people there who come in and ask for questions for help. But that's the group you're talking about right there.
Someone has Linda McCarthy wanted to say something.
Yeah, I would say, Linda, I'd be glad to give me an idea of your question in the chat box. I'd be glad to.
Yeah, well, I say if I can, I see Emmanuel asked, is a way customers find inheritance of family members to prove possession of property if someone passes away. So it's not just a matter of, it's a matter of finding the assets and then also doing all the legwork. One of the reasons we started the company, the InheritMore of finding assets, if I can kind of go back, was a lot of our clients for Assets International tend to be one-off. They tend to be individuals or small businesses. But we have some very large, both nonprofit and for-profit clients. And one of those large nonprofit clients, the American Heart Association, got a letter from the probate court in Columbus, Ohio, a few years ago, and said that said some woman died and left her entire estate to the AHA, and they knew nothing about her. They didn't do an estate plan with her. So they asked us to find her assets, and so we realized this is a common situation where someone dies and the heirs just don't even know what assets are out there. And one of the things we brought to the table, in addition to kind of from dealing with unclaimed property all these years of knowing where unclaimed assets tend to go to, is that we also know how to deal with it. My staff has been with me for years, and we know how to deal with all of the bureaucracy that comes with dealing with banks and insurance companies. We know how to find those shortcuts, and dealing with bureaucracy, dealing with red tape is there's an art to it that I have an excellent staff has really learned over the years how to deal with it. And our clients, usually people who are executors, tend to be the children of the deceased, and most of the deceased usually tending to be in their 70s or 80s. Those children tend to be 30s, 40s, 50s. They've got jobs, they've got busy lives, they've got children, and they've also got the stress and the grieving of having lost a loved one. So one of the things we're providing them is, let us take that off your plate. Let us deal with the rest of your life, deal with your grieving, deal with your job, deal with your family. Let us deal with that for you.
So just kind of real quick here, one of the things that happens, especially during this time of year, is we get people in who have fun kind of playing with our Zoom call. So if I don't have your name registered in our system, and you have a question, put the question in the chat box, and if it's relevant, I'll be glad to bring you in. If I recognize you as one thing, as a regular, but somebody who's new or using some sort of fake name, I'm just sorry, we just really can't continue to have people come.
And I apologize for stepping on your toes there.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I've been doing this a while, and and especially this time of year, people out of school, and so it's kind of a fun thing for kids to jump in. And so anyhow, we'll go ahead and keep it there. So again, if you have your hand up, be glad to offer a question, but like Libs, feel free to put a question in the chat box. If appropriate, we'll bring it. Otherwise, we'll just have to ask you to be removed. Okay, so again, this participative. So those of you who register, I have your name, I know who you are, you've been here before. I don't know about you. I could talk to Michael all day long. I would love to go to Orlando, really just to meet with him and have a beer and talk even more and hear stories about what he does. Because a couple things, I think sometimes realtors say to me, what does that have to do with me getting listings to sell houses? And the answer is, where I look at it, he's helping people. You can help people by bringing him in to help your people, right? You may not know anything about finding heirs, but you can help an estate find heirs by introducing Michael and his company and service to the people you're going to work with. And that's one more tool in your toolbox. Every realtor asks me, how do you get more attorney referrals? Well, one is be more valuable to the attorneys you work with. How do you do that if you're new? Well, you've met Michael. He's a nationally renowned expert in the subject of finding heirs. And there are times that attorneys need to find heirs, find more heirs, certify there's no others, whatever it may be. That's the purpose of the call. So if you have questions, I'd love to bring you into the process and the discussion. And really, we're having some Zoom is like a crazy world, a crazy.
I actually closed the chat because frankly, it was getting a little too distracting.
Yeah, I would say unless you have a stout stomach, I would say it's time to close the chat box for most of you guys. It's really going to be, we just really don't want that kind of language. So anyhow,
anyway, well, what you said, Bill, by the way, is relevant. Kind of like what I was saying before about creating value for the attorneys by directing clients to them. I can send clients to attorneys across the country, and then I've created value for those people, and also the clients themselves, the people who are the heirs, or potential executors, might remember that and say, "Oh, I need him to find those assets that are out there that I don't know about."
I mean, again, this is a regular part of the job, and I've been in court when judges ask questions when the estate is ready to close something out, and they'll say, "Are you sure there are no more heirs?" And how is an attorney going to answer that? Well, they may or may not have an answer, but one answer could be, we contracted, InheritMore. We contracted the industry expert or industry expert in the subject. They did an exhaustive search. Here's the notes that we have. We don't have anything else to offer. And the judge will at least realize, and it's on record, that they made a certain effort to do that. So again, that's the purpose of this, is to give you that extra tool to share. You might just share Michael's posts in your social media. Again, if you're new, you don't have maybe the content to share. He's already writing the content. He would love you to share his material with your audience of attorneys and prospective families. So that's the purpose of why we have him in here. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I would again say, my posts, again, they're a video, but they were awful in the beginning. I don't even want to go back and watch them because they're so bad. But when I started on LinkedIn, how many connections I had? 0. Now I have 12,000 or so. Yeah. We all start with 0. Don't get caught up in how many followers or how many comments, or like somebody else has. One of the things I would say to both question LinkedIn and to just in real life is, especially if you're starting out, is find that niche. And there's the old saying, riches are in the niches. And there are people who have that one thing. Like I know some attorneys who all they do is gun cases, of dealing with gun rights, of transferring gun ownership to trusts and stuff like that. Realtors, some realtors might only specialize in a particular, as you know, Bill, particular type of category. When we sold our house in Michigan a few years ago before we moved down here, we went with a realtor who, in our 1 square mile city that we live in, a suburb of Detroit, there is a team, 2 women who are realtors they kind of own that one city. They don't work much outside of Huntington Woods, the city we lived in, but they own Huntington Woods. And they know everybody who's buying and selling. And we're like, we're going with that because this is their wheelhouse. Right. If I lived 2 miles away, I would use somebody else. Right. But and they've made a very nice living for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in LA County, which is a large probate market, and frankly, my niche is even more niche. It's probate, but even more is LA County court confirmation sales is my particular niche as a salesperson. I have a team of agents around the country that I'm building, but in terms of my practice with attorneys, I believe I'm the expert on specifically those probates that need court confirmation. And where's Michael come in? Like I said, I've been in court where the judge says, "Are you sure there's no other heirs?" They're going to ask, "What efforts did you make?" And sometimes attorneys will say, "We did certain searches." Sometimes they'll say, "We hired a company." And obviously, a judge is going to be more favorable the more work you do and the more you can document what you did attempt to come up with. So that's why it's so important to do that. Okay. Yeah. So I see.
I would add one thing, and this is not necessarily a plug for my company, because we are somewhat selective when it comes to finding heirs about who we take on, and we will sometimes refer it out to, like I said, to an outside company and we will not get any referral for anything like that. Is that when you're searching for heirs, when it comes to research, you get what you pay for or what somebody else is paying for. When someone brings us in to find the heirs, we're getting paid by the heirs. But if it's a thing where the company is just getting paid a flat fee, what dollar amount is, they're going to have some, they're going to know what they're doing. Whereas looking on, say, Google or whatever free site, you get what's paid for in terms of the results. My guess is that if you were to look for me, you would see my address, my residential address is probably going to be the one in Michigan that I haven't lived in 2 years. But if you use some of these proprietary databases that my company or other finders pay a good amount of money to use, you'll see I now live at the particular address in Orlando where I live.
Okay, the chat box continues to be a mess, so I'm going to close the chat box to anybody else. If you put your camera on, I recognize you, raise your hand. I don't see any other questions at this point. Stuart Taylor, love to bring you in. Let's get you unmuted and come on in. Let's get.
Yeah, I was just curious. I have a friend who's a CPA, and he seems to travel all over the country as a court-appointed executor. And I wondered if you came across that function in life. Because there seems to be an organization and they meet quite regularly just to discuss the good points and the bad points of being an executive.
Yeah. So where do you, I don't think we've met before, have we?
No, we haven't. I'm just living in Newport Beach at the moment, but we've been living up in Menlo Park in Northern California.
Right. So there, I might need, and maybe there might be a little confusion. There are two categories here. I think you're talking about. One is the court-appointed executive. Those tend to be local people who are usually on an approved list. That in some courts, if someone dies either without heirs or there's nobody who will step forward, or there's too much fighting the family, the court will appoint an attorney. In some courts, they're part of the court staff, like an independent branch of the court they just get a salary. But then in some courts, there are private practice attorneys who are on an approved list to be an attorney. There are also what are called professional executors the family can hire and pay. So that's something that some banks or trust companies tend to do. But the issue with that is typically now banks only want to handle estates that are worth at least $5 to $10 million. And so there are those professional executors who will get hired by the family. It could be anywhere in the country to be a professional executor and get paid either an hourly fee or in some states they just get a percentage of whatever the gross value of the estate is. So that is something I'm familiar with. It is something I've kind of in the back of my head said, might add that to my suite of services at some point of being a professional executor. I just haven't, fortunately I've been busy enough I haven't had time to develop that.
Right, good.
I can say I got asked to be one on a case where there's an attorney I work with. There's particular reasons I want to go into as to why they asked me. They said we need somebody to step in and be the executor. The bottom line is, if somebody else steps forward, I would have to step aside, but I could still sell the property and get paid that way. So they said, they'll put you in line to sell the property either way. Right. You can't really do both, but you can do one or the other. And I said, yeah, I'd be glad to step in and do that. So I'm actually, in California, I think if you do more than two, you have to be licensed as a professional fiduciary, but you can do one. And so I'll let you guys know how that goes in the future.
Right. Well, one of the issues of being a professional fiduciary, that's your on your business card, so to speak, is that it is regulated. You have to, I think, have a significant amount of money in the bank that you have to show. I think it's like $500,000 that is just you have to just have sitting there. So if a one-person operation, that's a pretty daunting hurdle to get over, whereas a company can set aside that $500,000 and just keep it in a reserve and not have to touch it. So that is frankly one of the issues that I looked at in terms of being a professional fiduciary.
Can't you be bonded?
From what I understand, you probably can, and the way it works, I think, if I'm correct, is that you can get you go to the easiest state. You don't even have to live there. The easiest state in terms of getting certified, and then you can get reciprocity with other states. I think Nevada might be said. Like I said, I did some very cursory research into it a number of months ago, but haven't pursued it yet.
Yeah, it's an interesting area. Stuart, thank you so much. Appreciate bringing that up.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're kind of at the hour here, unless anybody else that I know whose video is on and I name recognize has a question. I think we're going to wrap it up here. Somebody mentioned on Facebook that they had a complex estate where the nature of the particular group of people, they found 11 siblings. I've seen those cases in multiple different ethnic or religious subgroups. I've seen 11 or 15 siblings several times, and so there's a lot more paperwork and often infighting. You can have 10 people on board. If you have one sibling that's a problem, the whole thing kind of comes to a grinding halt and can be litigated. So those are challenging. But the challenge that Michael has is if you uncover that, you're obligated to bring that information forward. So something we have to deal with. But definitely the more siblings, two things are true in probate. Michael, true or false? The more siblings, the more problems, all things equal. And second, the longer it goes, the more problems.
Yeah, so obviously I think with any group dynamic, the more people you have, the more potential there is for conflict. I know, as an entrepreneur, I know, but I remember reading this, when I had one employee, there was only one relationship there. but when I added a second employee, now I've got, if I remember correctly, there are three different relationships, and each person grows, you have the exponential growth of interlocking relationships. So yes, there's definitely the potential for it. I'd say in terms of an estate going on longer, I think it's more the inverse, that estates go longer because you have fighting more than you have fighting because estates go on longer. Yes, there are those cases where an estate drags on too long and everybody else gets mad at that one person in the family who's the executor, who everybody else thinks is dragging his feet or enriching himself by because there are some states where an executor can charge by the hour for the work they do, and will therefore just keep dragging it out. The longer it takes, it can definitely breed discontent.
With that said, I appreciate everybody participating. Michael, I really appreciate time with you. It's always fun and educational, and appreciate you helping me on this case. Hopefully it's the first of many we can continue to work on together.
Yes.
Thanks so much. Have a great holiday, and thank you for being with us today. We're going to wrap this up. This is the last podcast, obviously, of the year. We do Probate Weekly every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. We also live stream it on YouTube and Facebook. If you watch it there and you like it, subscribe to it, put comments there. If you're live, we'll respond to comments live. If you come in afterwards, well, I'll pick up those comments and either I'll answer them or forward them to the guest as well. But love to have you participate there. I just want to say, as we wrap up the year, it's just been an amazing opportunity for me to build this. I started a couple of years ago. We did conference calls, and then we moved to Zoom calls, and then we moved to this format and live streaming it. And it has been life-changing in so many ways, positive. It's been a pleasure, educational ride. It's been great for business, a lot of freedom in terms of my business. So I just want to thank all those of you for watching this. If you're a first-time person, thank you for coming in, come back. If you're a long-time supporter, like some of you are, thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate this. Free resources, you can go to probateweekly.com and join on the Zoom call directly and register if you'd like to. We do it every Thursday at 4. On Facebook, Probate Experts is our group. We have 2,000 members there. You can ask questions and post. And Michael, I'd love to have you post your content in our probate group there and maybe get some business out of that. probateexperts.com. And then that's it. I put Michael's information in the chat box. I'm on social media at BillGrossEXP. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you. Have a happy new year. We'll see you next year. Bye-bye.